So one thing I want to get to is this mass psychosis. We're seeing a lot of these leftist women and their meltdowns, and they're cutting their hair now. Uh, is a statement against the patriarchy. They're going to start wearing certain signs. I think it's blue ribbons, just to let each other know that they're not Trump supporters. They're also announcing that they're not going to be having sex with men or with their husbands or with their boyfriends or whoever it is. A little bit strange because they're doing that to protest not being able to have abortion, but yet they're not going to be having sex with men. It's all a little bit confusing and I would say a little bit demonic. Daniel, what do you make of this leftist feminist meltdown and the themes that I've expressed?
The left is a cult. It's been obvious all along that it's a cult, and they're engaging in rituals. They're engaging in rituals, self-harm, which is what some of them are doing. They're engaging in rituals meant to expiate, to banish things. They're engaging in rituals to set themselves aside from the rest of the country. Again, this is very much a cult, and this is what people in cults do. And for many of them, this is actually validating. They didn't necessarily want to come out when so much as they wanted an excuse to engage in this kind of deranged behavior. We'll see riots in the streets from those of them who are capable of it. And we'll see all sorts of dysfunctional, crazy behavior on TikTok from those who actually don't have the guts or don't have the physical makeup or the gender, if you still believe there's such a thing as women, to engage in that. So you'll have soy boys riding in the streets, and you'll have some of these women riding on TikTok.
Steve, are you absolutely horrified at the prospect of leftist feminists with piercings and lots of tattoos not having sex with men anymore? This is very frightening, right?
I don't know. It sounds like Darwinism at work here, doesn't it? It is a very, very strange thing. And, I think that a lot of this, kind of these incubation centers are at our college campuses and universities. And I really do think that I've got two daughters and they're both out of college now. I'm happy to report that they voted right and they get it. But some of these kids in these colleges, it's just like it's an incubation center. I think that we need to start looking at federal funding for some of these schools and cutting it because they are turning out anti-American, anti-capitalism, anti-white, anti-patriarchy, whatever they can wrap their heads around. And no, I'm not at all concerned about them having sex or not having sex. The funny thing is that them not having sex is kind of just they're kind of killing their own. They're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Pardon the pun. I mean, nobody wants to have sex with them. So,
Thank you, Steve. And I'm just thinking about how clever the left is. In my view, this is a spiritual war as well, and how Satan works. This is very, very fascinating how brilliant these evil forces work. Because let's just look at a very large portion of voters now in terms of leftist women. So you give women equality, you take virtue out of society, give women the right to vote, convince women that there is no God or no morals, then convince them they need to start being very promiscuous, then convince them that they need to ideally get pregnant and engage in child sacrifice. And if they're not allowed to do that, their most important right is being violated, and that's what they need to vote on. And so connecting all of those dots, it's kind of brilliant this Marxist strategy and what it does to a very large majority of women, isn't it? And in no way in what I was saying is that I'm against female, like myself personally. I'm just saying that's their strategy. Equality is a great thing on many realms. Of course, women should have the right to vote. Of course, women should have all these rights. But if they believed in virtue and in morality, they could have a civilizing influence on society and on men. But if the Marxists brainwash a large majority of women, then they have such a large percentage of the population simply voting on the issue of abortion and throwing temper tantrums if they can't engage in child sacrifice. This is a really scary thing. Daniel, what do you think?
Well, the goal here is unhappiness. It's always been unhappiness. But how do you get people to be unhappy? Well, you offer them the lure of happiness. You offer them the promise of happiness. We got this back in the 60s and 70s with the early counterculture. You can have free love. I mean, the free love movement actually goes back to the 19th century, but never mind that for the moment. You can have this. And then we're going to create obstacles for you and attribute the obstacles to the other side. And that's really what ultimately abortion is. Of course, it's just one in a series of obstacles. The ultimate goal was to completely shatter relationships between men and women to, again, create unhappiness. If you have men and women coming together, getting married, building stable families, then they're worse recruits for the left. On the other hand, if you have people being kept apart, being kept isolated from each other, being kept resentful and unhappy, well, you have perfect recruits for revolution. And that's what they're doing. Abortion is just, again, one of those means of creating the state of unhappiness. As Steve said, a lot of this is coming out of college campuses. It's part of the pipeline for creating people who are never going to actually come together, never actually going to feel validated, never actually going to feel like I am making a useful difference. I have a family, I have a life, I am part of something greater than myself.
Steve?
Well, I completely concur. I really am just puzzled at the angst that drives them. I mean, you just have to be miserable all the time. I mean, and and they're miserable about everything. I mean, it'd be one thing if they could say, okay, here's why I voted for Kamala. I have a strong opinion on women's reproductive rights. Okay, fine. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. But that's not what this is all about. This is about that. This is about capitalism. This is about, like I said, the patriarchy, whatever. And all of this is just, Daniel's right. You have to be miserable. You have to be very angry. You have to, and I just don't get that anger. I'm a happy warrior, as Reagan would say. And I also, speaking of Reagan, one thing I kept reminding myself as the election, as the ballots were starting to come in and we're starting to see the blue wall crumble. And I turned to my wife and I said, God, Ronald Reagan was right. Never underestimate the wisdom of the American people. And when you think of all the stuff that we've had to face, actors, the media, even sports anchors and athletes just bombarding us with all this, but the American people saw through all of it. And I don't think these blue-haired, angry Marxists on campuses across the fruited plain are going to make much of a difference. I just hope that it fades away quicker rather than later.
Well, I'm not sure it's going to fade away. I think it's so powerful. It's just that right now a lot of good people showed up, but that's definitely going to keep growing as the Marxist influence continues on the youth and on females and the influence they try to have on them.